When I was 10, the world ended with the sound of a lock clicking. My name is Noah Mercer. I'm 31, and I teach architecture at a community college in Oregon. But this isn't about the man I became. It's about the boy who once counted every crack in a concrete wall. My grandmother, Eleanor Mercer, was the kind of woman who smiled for neighbors and froze her heart for family. She said she locked me in the basement for safety when the storm hit that summer. But storms don't last 4 days. And safety doesn't mean padlocks. I still remember the light through the floorboards, the smell of damp books, and her voice upstairs. Calm, measured, pretending nothing was wrong. I survived, but I never went back. Not until 20 years later, when a lawyer called to tell me Eleanor Mercer had passed away, and that I was her sole heir, $84 million. I thought it was a cruel joke. But when I returned to her estate, the locks were still there, and so were the secrets she'd buried behind them. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching FR. We read them all, and your words keep us going. Money doesn't erase fear. It just funds the investigation. The Mercer estate stood at the far edge of the valley behind iron gates that hadn't opened in 20 years. I gripped the keys the lawyer had mailed me, their metal cold enough to sting. The caretaker, a quiet man named Harold Dent, waited beside me with his hands tucked into his coat. She left everything exactly as she wanted it, he said. His voice sounded more like a warning than a welcome. When the gates creaked open, the sound echoed down the empty driveway like a sigh. The house loomed ahead, gray stone, tall windows, and that strange stillness old houses carry when their stories aren't finished. Inside, the smell hit me first. Old lavender, varnish, and something faintly metallic, like time itself refusing to move on. The floor groaned under my steps. Every portrait on the wall seemed to follow me with eyes that remembered too much. On the hallway table, a sealed envelope waited. Thick cream paper, wax still unbroken, the Mercer family crest pressed deep into it. My name was written across the front in her sharp, perfect handwriting. My grandmother's handwriting. I hesitated before tearing it open. Inside was a single line, written in ink so dark it looked almost blue. Before you judge me, understand the blueprints. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I noticed something folded beneath the note, an old architectural plan. It was the layout of the house, the basement. I traced the lines with my finger, following every wall, every measurement. But something was wrong. There, near the bottom corner, was a room I didn't remember. A room drawn beneath the floor. No stairs, no door. No label. My pulse quickened. I looked around the hallway, at the quiet, at the way the light cut through the dust. The house felt alive, like it was holding its breath. I unfolded the plan again, reading the small faded text in the margin. Approved, 1979. That was before I was even born. The air behind me shifted. A soft creak, like someone had stepped into the room. I turned. Harold stood in the doorway, his face pale, eyes fixed on the blueprint in my hands. "Mr. Mercer," he said quietly. His voice cracked around my name. "That room," I asked, barely more than a whisper. "What is it?" He swallowed hard. "That room was sealed before you were born, and in that moment, every sound in the house stopped, like even the walls didn't want to remember what came next. Walls remember what people forget." Harold and I stood in the old pantry, the smell of dust and mold clinging to the air like a warning. The blueprint had shown the hidden outline clearly, a hollow space beneath our feet. My palms were slick as I pried the first floorboard loose. It groaned like a voice waking after decades of silence. We pulled away the panels one by one until my flashlight caught the edge of the metal. A hatch, rusted, sealed shut, but real. I knelt beside it. The latch was stiff, frozen in place until Harold handed me a crowbar. One solid pull and the metal shrieked open. The gust that escaped made my skin prickle, colder than it should have been, sharp with the scent of damp concrete and old paper. I aimed the light down. A small space, bare walls. A wooden desk sits right in the center, and on it a typewriter. I climbed down slowly, every step sinking into the weight of memory. The air was thick and still, the kind that doesn't belong to the living. The typewriter sat waiting, its black keys glinting faintly. The ribbon was new, the spool still glossy. On the roller, a single sheet of paper waited, the letters pressed hard and uneven, like someone had hit each key with trembling hands. Truth builds slowly. Lies cement faster. The words looked fresh, too fresh. I touched the edge of the page, still crisp. Someone had typed this recently. My throat tightened. She'd been here. My grandmother. Writing to someone. Maybe to me. Maybe to the part of her she'd buried. In the corner of the small room, I noticed a stack of journals. Leather covers are cracked and flaking, and spines are labeled with dates. 1958, 1960, 1974. The line of years went on, all the way to 2021. I reached for the last one, my hands shaking. The paper inside smelled like cedar and smoke. Her handwriting filled every line, steady, deliberate, like she was building a confession, one sentence at a time. Halfway through the final page, the ink trailed off mid-word. He will come back to build what I could not. The sentence just stopped. No period, no closure. I stared at the last mark of her pen, imagining her sitting here, pausing, hearing something above her, realizing the story wasn't done yet. Harold's voice echoed faintly from above. "Mr. Mercer? You all right down there?" I opened my mouth to answer, but then froze. A sound, sharp, clear, from above me. The long, drawn-out groan of a floorboard under weight. I tilted my flashlight toward the ceiling, every muscle locked. Harold was still standing by the hatch. I could see his shadow in the doorway. But the sound had come from the far end of the house. Someone else was up there, and they were moving. Some inheritances don't buy freedom. They buy obligation. Marion Lowe, the estate lawyer, arrived just after sunrise. She had that polis, had calm lawyers wear like armor, her smile polite, but her eyes distant. The morning light glinted off the silver clasp of her briefcase as she spread out the paperwork across the dining table. The estate includes land deeds, an investment portfolio, and several trust accounts, she said, flipping through the stack. And a few unfinished obligations. I frowned. Obligations. Her expression didn't change, but she reached into her case and handed me a small blue velvet box. It felt heavier than it should have. Inside, nestled against the fabric, was a bronze compass. Its surface was scratched, but the engraving was clear. Find the heart of the house. The architect in me saw a metaphor. The grandson in me knew Eleanor never used metaphors. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I set the compass on the desk, watched the needle spin, steady, then drift away from north, pointing toward the orchard behind the house. The air was cold, the ground slick with dew as I crossed the yard. The trees stood in quiet rows, skeletal against the moonlight. The compass needle held steady, pulling me deeper into the orchard until I reached the old oak. Something was buried beneath it. I could feel it before I saw it, the faint outline of stone beneath the dirt. I knelt, brushed the soil away, and found a foundation slab. Etched into the surface were words worn but legible. Mercer Institute, 1989. I remembered whispers from my childhood, her dream of building an art school for gifted kids. It was abandoned after a scandal, something no one talked about. The compass had led me straight to her failure. But as I cleared more dirt from the stone, I noticed another inscription, smaller, half-hidden beneath the soil. The letters were shallow but deliberate. For the boy in the basement. My breath caught. The night air suddenly felt heavy, pressing against my chest. The compass needle trembled, spinning in slow circles before it stopped completely, pointing back toward the house. I stood there, staring at the words carved into the earth, the echo of her handwriting in my head. She'd hidden her guilt beneath the same ground she once dreamed of building something pure upon. For the boy in the basement. I whispered it out loud, my own voice barely a sound. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint creak of the house's shutters in the distance. Somewhere inside that house, behind the walls that had never stopped watching, my grandmother's secret heart was still beating. She mailed the truth decades before I was old enough to read it. The morning light poured across her desk, catching on stacks of yellowed papers and unpaid bills. I'd spent hours going through drawers that smelled of cedar and regret, searching for something, anything, that explained why she'd left me everything. That's when I saw it. A small corner of cardstock wedged beneath a pile of brittle photographs. It was a postcard. The front showed a faded image of the Chicago skyline in soft blue tones. The postmark read June 12, 1989. The handwriting on the back stopped my breath. If anything happens to me, tell him the basement child is safe. Basement child. I read the line again, each word colder than the one before it. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped it. I turned it over, addressed neatly to Julian Rowe, Art Benefactor, Chicago, Illinois. I looked at the number printed at the bottom, half expecting it to be dead after all these years. Still, I dialed. It rang twice. A man's voice answered, old, trembling, but unmistakably alert. Julian Rowe speaking. My words came out uneven. Mr. Rowe, my name is Noah Mercer. I found a postcard from Eleanor Mercer addressed to you. It's from 1989. The line went silent for a moment. Then his voice softened. Eleanor Mercer. Good God, I thought that name was buried long ago. She mentioned a child, I said carefully, one she called the basement child. The pause stretched. I could hear him breathing through the receiver, slow and heavy. She told me she took in a boy, he said finally. one who wasn't hers by blood, a foundling. She said he was special, but that he couldn't be seen. My chest tightened. I laughed, a hollow sound that didn't belong to humor. That boy was me. I was her grandson. He hesitated, his tone changing. That's not what she told me, son. Something in his voice, the certainty, made the room tilt. Papers fluttered off the desk like falling leaves. What do you mean? I asked quietly. He sighed, a sound that felt older than both of us. She told me she had no family left, that the boy she was protecting was someone else's. Someone important. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Whose? He didn't answer. Instead, I heard the faint rustle of drawers, papers, the slow shuffle of an old man searching for ghosts. I still have something she sent me, he said finally. A photograph. She made me promise never to destroy it. My heart pounded. Can you send it to me? He nodded, though I could only hear the weight of it in his voice. It'll reach you soon, and when it does, his tone broke slightly. You'll understand why she did what she did. The line clicked dead. I stood there in silence, the postcard still in my hand. The ink faded, but the words burned fresh in my mind. The basement child is safe. 2 days later, a package arrived at my door. Thin, plain. Inside, wrapped in old tissue paper, was a single photograph. And when I saw it, everything I thought I knew about my family began to unravel. You can't unsee the face that isn't there. The envelope arrived 2 days later, plain and unmarked, just my name written across it in an unsteady scrawl. No return address. The paper felt too light for something that had been carried through decades, but when I tore it open, the weight hit instantly. A single photograph slipped out and fluttered onto the table. A family portrait. My grandmother, younger but unmistakable, her posture regal, her smile tight and controlled. Beside her stood a man I didn't recognize, and between them, a boy no older than 10. His face had been scratched out so violently the paper was torn through, thin white scars cutting where eyes and a mouth should have been. Behind them, the Mercer mansion glowed in the background, its walls pristine and new, before the ghosts moved in, before the secrets turned the light gray. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in my grandmother's looping, deliberate cursive, were 5 words. 1972. My only choice. My stomach twisted. 1972. That was nearly 50 years ago. I wasn't even born yet. I glanced up at the living room wall. The same wallpaper, the soft floral pattern curling at the edges, yellowed with age, stretched behind me exactly as it had in the picture. The same room. The same space frozen in time. But the man beside her wasn't my grandfather. I knew that face from somewhere else. It took a moment for the memory to surface the name from the postcard. The voice that trembled through the phone. Dr. Martin Rowe, Julian's brother. An architect. The realization crawled up my spine like ice. My grandmother had posed for this picture beside a man history claimed never existed. She'd erased someone, then rebuilt her life on the edit. I stared at the photo again, tracing the outline of the boy's small hand where it reached toward the man's coat. My throat tightened. I could almost feel the shape of the missing face, like it was waiting to be remembered. Harold appeared in the doorway, his usual calm replaced by something tense, almost fearful. "Mr. Mercer," he said, voice low. "You shouldn't have found that." I turned toward him, the photo trembling between my fingers. "Why? Who is he?" Harold hesitated. His eyes darted to the staircase as if expecting someone else to come down. "You wouldn't understand," he said finally. "Not yet. Try me." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "The man in that picture isn't supposed to exist anymore." My heart pounded. "What do you mean, wasn't supposed to exist?" But Harold only shook his head. She made sure of it. Eleanor erased him from every record, every paper, every memory. The air between us felt electric, too tight to breathe. I looked back at the faceless boy in the photograph and felt a strange pull, something deep and familiar. The scratches weren't random. They were deliberate, and I realized with a shiver that whoever had erased the boy's face had done it to protect him. Fire hides things better than time. Harold and I worked in silence that afternoon, dust rising in thin golden lines through the sunlight cutting across the parlor. The fireplace hadn't been used in years. I'd always thought it was decorative, a symbol of warmth in a house that never truly had any, but the soot stains on the edges looked newer than they should have been. When Harold pried away the cast-iron grate, something behind the brick caught the light. Not ashes, stone, smooth, deliberate, sealed with mortar. "Looks like she built this in," he murmured. I crouched beside him, running my hand over the edges. The surface was cold, faintly rough, a hidden box, buried behind years of smoke and silence. We chiseled the mortar until the stone came loose with a groan that echoed through the room. The smell that escaped was a strange mix of soot, ink, and old leather. Inside, beneath a thin layer of ash, were charred papers, edges blackened, corners crumbling into dust. Birth certificates, legal forms, letters warped by heat. I picked up one that had survived enough to read. The ink had bled, but the words were still legible, faint ghosts of bureaucratic truth. Adoption annulled by guardian request, Noah Rowe, age 10. My breath left me all at once. Rowe, not Mercer. I wasn't her grandson. I was someone else's child, someone she had claimed, then disowned. Adopted, then unadopted. My name, rewritten. My history, burned. I sat back on the floor, papers scattered around me like pieces of a puzzle that had been set on fire before anyone could solve it. Harold said my name softly, but it sounded far away. Mr. Mercer, Rowe, I whispered. My name was Noah Rowe. The words felt strange, like wearing someone else's skin. Eleanor had erased me from her lineage, yet somehow left me everything. Why? Why build an empire only to pass it to someone she'd once erased? I sifted through the ashes, searching for anything that could make sense of it. Most of the papers disintegrated at my touch, breaking into black dust. But at the very bottom of the box, something metallic glinted under the soot. I reached for it carefully. A small metal key, tarnished but solid, with a faded tag attached by wire. The handwriting on the tag was unmistakable, hers. Rowe safe. I turned it over in my palm, the metal cold and heavy, my reflection warped in its surface. She had burned her secrets, but not this. A key she'd hidden in fire, labeled with the name she'd tried to erase. I looked at Harold. His face was pale, the weight of realization pressing on both of us. "Do you know what this opens?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "Whatever it is. She wanted only you to find it. The flames might have taken everything else, but this was deliberate. Eleanor had left me a trail made of ashes and truth, and the key in my hand was just the beginning. Dead women shouldn't still hold keys. The safe was heavier than its size suggested, tucked deep in the basement vault of a downtown bank that smelled faintly of iron and history. The brass plate on the front read, "Row Safe Number 47B. The clerk looked at the registration form twice before speaking. "It's under two names," he said cautiously, "Dr. Martin Rowe and Mrs. Eleanor Mercer." Hearing their names together felt like watching two ghosts shake hands. He hesitated, glancing at the document again, then back at me. "Are you sure you want to open this, Mr. Mercer?" I almost corrected him Rowe, but the words still felt foreign. I nodded anyway. He turned the key, spun the dial, and pulled the heavy door open. The air that escaped was dry, tinged with metal and something faintly floral, lavender, just like her house. Inside sat a small box lined with blue velvet. No jewels, no cash. Just three things. 2 sealed letters, and 1 cassette tape. The first envelope was labeled, "My Architect." The second, "To whom I could not save." I stared at the words, fingers trembling. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, the kind of script written when the truth can't wait anymore. Then there was the cassette, old black plastic, a strip of faded masking tape across the front with 3 words in her handwriting. Basement, 2002. The year she locked me there. I didn't own a cassette player. No one really did anymore, but the college studio still had one, used for archiving old oral histories. The next morning, I borrowed it and sat alone in the editing room, the world outside muted behind soundproof glass. The tape clicked into place, and for a moment all I could hear was static. Then her voice, faint, warbling but unmistakable, rose from the speaker. "Noah," she said. Her tone was rough, fragile. "If you're hearing this, it means you found what I couldn't destroy." My chest tightened. She drew in a ragged breath. "I kept you there because they were coming for you. They wanted what your father built, and they would have used you to get it. I couldn't tell the world whose son you were, Oat, without losing you." Her voice cracked. The faint hum of the tape motor filled the silence between her pauses. "I told myself the basement was protection," she continued, "that you'd forgive me once you understood. But lies don't protect forever. They rot the walls they're built into." A shudder escaped me. I pressed my hand against the old recorder like I could steady her voice through touch. She inhaled sharply, then whispered something so soft I had to rewind to catch it. "The money," she said, voice breaking into static. "The money was never mine." The tape clicked, stopped. I sat there, surrounded by the buzz of silence, her last words still echoing through the hum of the machine. The money was never hers. So whose was it? Her will listed no bank, but the numbers did. I spread the papers across Ethan's desk under the dull hum of fluorescent lights. He was one of the few people I trusted, sharp, patient, and the kind of man who could read a ledger like other people read body language. The documents from the Rowe safe looked ordinary to me. Old bank slips, transaction ledgers, typed statements with decades of dust baked into their folds. But Ethan's eyes narrowed the moment he saw them. "This isn't a trust," he murmured, scanning the pages. "There's no estate holding structure here. These are direct investment returns." He typed into his laptop, the glow of the monitor reflecting in his glasses. Lines of data flashed by faster than I could follow. Then he stopped, his brow furrowing. $84 million, he said slowly. "But not from real estate, not from stocks." He turned the screen toward me. "This account belongs to an art investment fund, registered internationally under the name Dr. Martin Rowe." My heart skipped. My father? The man I'd only seen in old photos and half-burned letters? Ethan leaned closer. "Someone's been managing it quietly for over 30 years. Eleanor Mercer." I sat back, my chest tightening. The house, the secrets, the lies, they were all connected by this invisible thread of money. He opened another file showing a string of payments, each labeled with the same title: the Safe Haven Architecture Grant, U.S. Youth Homes. At first, I didn't understand. Then the meaning hit me. The grant funded shelters, hundreds of them, across the country. Each one was linked to a small architectural nonprofit registered to her estate. "She used the money to build homes," I whispered, "for children." Ethan nodded. "Not just homes. Safe spaces. Every account matches a construction project connected to child welfare programs. It's all public record, except for who paid for it." My hands shook as I traced the list. Cities, towns, neighborhoods I'd never visited, all carrying her unseen fingerprints. For 30 years, my grandmother had quietly built sanctuaries for abandoned children, all while I'd grown up believing she was the monster who locked me away. The irony hit hard. The basement that had haunted my nightmares hadn't been a prison. It had been a shield. A hiding place during a custody war I didn't even know existed. She'd kept me hidden because someone had wanted me gone. My throat tightened. "She wasn't protecting herself," I said softly. "She was protecting me." Ethan didn't answer right away. He flipped through the papers again, his jaw tightening. Then he stopped on a single line at the bottom of a document, small print that most people would have missed. He read it twice before looking up at me, eyes wide. "Noah," he said slowly, his voice lower now, heavier. "This fund doesn't just mention you." "What do you mean?" He turned the page around, tapping at the signature line. "It names you as co-trustee." I stared at him, not understanding. "That can't be right." "It's been there since." He nodded once. "Since 2002. The same year she locked me in the basement. Redemption doesn't always arrive postmarked. The wardrobe in her bedroom smelled like mothballs and lavender soap, the kind she'd used since before I was born. I'd searched it a dozen times for financial papers or deeds, but that afternoon, something different caught my eye. The faint outline of a hinge at the bottom panel. I knelt, pressed my fingers against the wood, and felt it shift. A hidden latch clicked, soft as a breath. Beneath the false bottom sat a small wooden box, the surface worn smooth from decades of touch. My chest tightened before I even opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. Each envelope was sealed but yellowed, labeled in her looping handwriting. Noah, age 11. Noah, 15. Noah, 18. Noah, 25. Every birthday, every milestone she'd missed, she'd written to me but never mailed them. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the quiet weight of her unsent words. The paper felt fragile, as if I breathed too hard. The apologies inside might turn to dust. One envelope sat apart from the rest, bound with a red ribbon. On the front, in thicker ink, "Open at 31. That was this year. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter written in her slanted, deliberate script. "I couldn't give you a childhood," it began, "but I can give you the world you were meant to rebuild." I swallowed hard and kept reading. "Your father, Martin Rowe, was a visionary and a target. When the company they built together collapsed, he was accused of crimes he didn't commit. He refused to name those who framed him. The only way to protect his son was to disappear him. That's why I took you. Why did I make you mine?" The words blurred through tears I didn't notice falling. "I locked you away because they were watching. They would have taken you to use against him. You hated me, and you were right to. But one day, when it was safe, I wanted you to see that it wasn't punishment. It was preservation." I set the letter down, my pulse hammering. She hadn't locked me away out of cruelty. She'd done it because the world outside wanted to erase me. I leaned back against the wardrobe, staring at the ceiling. For years, I told myself she'd stolen my freedom. Maybe she'd just traded hers to keep me alive. As I folded the letter, something slipped out from between the pages, thin and yellowed. A newspaper clipping. The headline stopped my breath. "Dr. Martin Rowe declared dead. 2002 plane crash." The photo beneath it showed a mangled wreckage, flames frozen mid-bloom. But it wasn't my father in the picture. The man in the grainy photo was younger, different build, and definitely not Martin Rowe. I stared at it, my hands cold. Whoever was buried under my father's name wasn't him, and that meant the man everyone thought was dead was still out there, somewhere. Some ghosts book flight returns. I spent the next 3 days chasing records through government archives, insurance databases, and aviation reports that had long been buried in bureaucratic dust. Every page pointed to the same story: a crash off the Washington coast, 2002. A single fatality identified as Dr. Martin Rowe. Cause: mechanical failure. But something didn't add up. The dental chart attached to the autopsy was blurred, photocopied poorly. I tracked down the original report, and when the digital scan appeared on the screen, my heart skipped. The dental structure didn't match the medical file listed under my father's name. The height was wrong. Even the scar noted on the body left forearm, surgical, didn't exist in any of my father's old photographs or medical records. The man buried as Martin Rowe wasn't my father. I called Julian Rowe again. The moment he picked up, I could hear the tremor in his breath. "Julian, listen to me," I said. "The man in that crash wasn't him. The records don't match." There was a long silence. I could hear the rustle of papers, maybe the faint scrape of a chair. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked like old wood. "My brother's alive, isn't he?" "Yes," I said quietly. "He is." Julian didn't speak for several seconds. Then, softly, he made me promise not to tell. "But if you've come this far, he'll want to see you." He gave me an address, a rural route outside Seattle, near a lake I'd never heard of. The drive took hours. The road wound through misty pines, the air sharp with the smell of rain. My pulse quickened the closer I got. Every turn felt like stepping deeper into a story I wasn't supposed to read. When I reached the house, it barely looked inhabited. A small cabin surrounded by overgrown grass and quiet water. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. I parked, stepped out, and for a long moment just stood there, afraid to knock. Then the door opened. An old man stepped out, walking with a cane. His shoulders were stooped, his hair silver, but his eyes stopped me cold. My eyes, he froze too. For a second, the world just stilled. The wind through the trees, the creak of the porch, everything disappeared into silence. Then he smiled, slow and trembling. Eleanor kept her promise. I couldn't speak. My voice broke somewhere between disbelief and recognition. I started, but he just nodded. He stepped closer, his hand shaking as he reached for mine. "You look like her," he whispered, "and him. I've waited half my life to see that face again." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions where he'd been, why he'd left, what promise he meant, but he was already turning back toward the door. From the table just inside the cabin, he picked up an envelope, yellowed around the edges, sealed with wax. He held it out to me. "She made me wait for you," he said softly. I took it, feeling the weight of decades pressed between the paper and my fingers. Whatever truth waited inside, I wasn't the only one she'd been keeping alive. The only architecture stronger than concrete is grace. I broke the seal on the envelope my father had handed me. Inside, folded with the precision of a blueprint, were drawings covered in Eleanor's handwriting and his neat technical notes. At the top of the first page, Mercer Rowe Art Home. He saw my confusion and smiled faintly. "It was supposed to be a sanctuary," he said. "A place where abandoned kids could learn art and design. Somewhere beauty could rebuild what life broke." The lines on the blueprints were clean but incomplete. Staircases stopped mid-air. Corridors led nowhere. I ran my fingers across them and whispered, "She wanted to finish this." He nodded. We both did. The investors pulled out after the scandal. People said I stole funds that she covered for me. But she took the blame herself. Publicly. She thought that if she bore the guilt, I could keep working quietly until it was safe again. It hit me like sunlight through dust. Her cruelty hadn't been punishment. It had been armor. Every sharp word, every cold glance, all of it a shield built to keep the story contained. He leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. Eleanor was never cruel to destructive. She was cruel to protect. I thought of the house, the hidden rooms, the journals, the years of silence. Every piece of her life was an unfinished foundation, waiting for someone to finish the build. I looked down at the blueprints again and saw something new. In the margin, written faintly in her script, "Leave the central walls open, light must pass through everything." She'd been designing forgiveness long before either of us knew what it looked like. My father's voice grew soft. "Every dollar she left you wasn't for revenge, Noah. It was to finish what we started." I turned toward him, and for the first time he looked small, like a man carrying years of gratitude and regret in equal measure. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "She wanted you to have what I couldn't finish," he said. "The house, the funds, the trust, it's all yours now. Not because she owed you, but because she believed you'd use it right. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You're saying she knew I'd forgive her? He nodded, tears catching the last bit of afternoon light. That's why she left it all to you, Noah. I traced the edge of the blueprint one more time. The ink was faded, but the message was still strong. Forgiveness wasn't something you built once. It was something you renovated again and again until the walls could finally breathe. And maybe that's what she'd been doing all along, building a place sturdy enough to hold redemption. Some inheritances rebuild souls. A year later, the Mercer Row art home stood where weeds and broken dreams used to be. The oak tree from the old orchard shaded the entrance. The walls gleamed a soft white, covered in murals painted by the first group of foster kids who called it theirs. Their laughter filled the courtyard like music I didn't know I'd missed. Inside, sunlight spilled across the polished floor, bouncing off wide windows that had once been bricked shut. The old basement T, my basement TH, had been transformed. The cracked concrete was gone, replaced with color and life. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, brushes in hand, painting bright scenes of oceans, cities, and wings. I watched a boy trace his initials on the corner of the wall and smiled. That was where I'd once drawn my escape routes in chalk. Now it was his canvas of freedom. No locks, no fear. Only light. At the dedication ceremony, I carried two things with me: her bronze compass and his unfinished blueprints. They rested together in a glass display case near the entrance. A simple plaque beneath them read, "For Eleanor and Matin, who built from silence." As the applause quieted, I felt a presence beside me. My father stood there, leaning lightly on his cane, eyes glistening as he watched the children move through the hallways. "She knew forgiveness was the real fortune," he whispered. I nodded. Maybe it was. Because the inheritance she left behind wasn't money. It was the chance to create beauty out of brokenness. I took one last look at the case, the compass frozen midpoint toward the heart of the building, exactly where she'd said to find it. The blueprint beneath it, now complete, outlined every open door, every window that welcomed light instead of hiding from it. That night, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the building glowed softly from within. The laughter of the children echoed through the same halls that once carried secrets and fear. I stood outside, the cool breeze brushing my face, and realized the past had finally stopped whispering. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It remodels it. And when you rebuild with truth, even locked doors become open hallways. I turned the compass gently in my hand, the bronze warm from the day's light. The needle still pointed true, not north, but home.